Thank you. And welcome to this special SiriusXM Town Hall event. We're broadcasting from the SiriusXM Music City Theater in downtown Nashville, overlooking Broadway, the high church of country music, the Ryman Theater in the background. I am Ken Coleman, and our special guest is the host of the Dave Ramsey Show. Celebrating 25 years tonight, Dave. Has it just gone faster than you could imagine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It went really, really slow, and it went really, really fast. It's kind of like raising kids, you know? You got a 30-year-old kid. How did that happen?
Yeah,
It was 20 minutes ago. I was telling her not to touch the stove, and then boom, now she's got kids.
Wow.
It happens fast. Life
really
goes
does.
quick. And the older you get, the faster it goes.
That's so true. Well, this is a special night for Dave, our entire team, many of whom are listening in, and of course, many are here in the room tonight. What we're going to do is we're going to ask some questions, kind of go back through the 25 years. It's hard to believe. We're trying to cover as much as we can. And then, of course, we have some questions from our audience here in this theater. So, Dave, I think it'd be fun to start with the story that you have told. For anybody who's listened to the show for any amount of time, they have heard you tell the story how you and Sharon hit rock bottom. But what I want to start with is the emotions. Take us back. What did it feel like? The reality that you had lost it all, that you had a family, and everything that you had dreamed of had come to this screeching halt.
The first emotion that comes to mind is terror. We were so scared we couldn't breathe. And we had a brand new baby, Rachel Cruz, was born that year. Rachel Ramsey, she was then. And of course, we had a toddler, Denise, our oldest. And we were 28 years old. I mean, we were just kids. We didn't have any idea how to do it, how to figure this thing out. All we knew was they were taking everything, and we were getting foreclosed on, and the lights had been cut off, and the water had been cut off, and we made a lot of jokes about it. But Sharon said, she would have left, but she didn't have a car, so she didn't have the money to leave. So we really, it was truly a marriage hanging on by a thread, because my self-esteem was destroyed. I was such an arrogant, cocky character, and then losing everything just pounded me into powder. And she actually probably needed someone to be courageous in that moment, and I was not. I was just scared, which made her even more scared, more terrified. And so it was really ugly chemistry at that time. And I think that's why when somebody calls on the air to this day, I can sometimes, not every time, but most of the time I can sense what's going on. And I remember, it takes me right back there. It was 30-something years ago, but boom, I'm right there. I remember that heart rate changing when you try to bounce the checkbook, and oh God, I forgot to put that check in, and I'm overdraft. And the sweat comes on the palms of your hands and over the top of your lip and over the top of your eyes, and your heart rate starts going up, and you're like, oh God, what are we going to do? And it's just week after week, night after night, the collections calls coming in, and it was devastating. It was a very hard time.
There's probably some people that are listening right now that maybe not heard the show in its totality, and they're hearing this, and they have that same feeling right now. And they're just trying to make it through night 1, 2, or 3. How did you make it through that terror?
Well, I would like to say I bounced back, but I really didn't. I mean, I sat around, whined, and blamed everybody else. It was somebody else's fault. I was a victim. And so one of the things that I coach people on is, your road out is not victimhood. Your road out is self-responsibility. I'm looking in the mirror and I'm going, dude, you're the problem. And so once I took that on, that probably was part of when healing began. But also, we're Christians, and so our faith had an element to it. But Christians are scared, too, and Christians do stupid stuff. And we were scared and had done stupid stuff. We were on that list. And so, there wasn't like magically you say, well, my faith got me through it. No, it wasn't, because the faith comes and goes minute by minute, depending on what's facing you and where you are right then. But overall, you have this sense that, what Scripture says, God says, I have a plan for you. And it's not to bring you harm, but to bring you hope. And you start to decide, do I really believe that my Heavenly Father's crazy about me, even though I'm one of his stupid kids, really. And, and you start to believe that, and it gives you a reason to get up and go, okay, we're going to get through this, and somehow this is going to be redeemed. And here we sit 25 years later, and man, has he redeemed it.
Yeah, it's so powerful. As you begin to climb out together, you and Sharon, begin to sense some sort of plan, and you begin to climb out. Take us back to when you start to begin to help others. You kind of go, all right, this isn't just about me climbing out, but I might be able to help some other people avoid this or climb out as I am climbing out.
Well, I've always kind of been a teacher. It is one of my gifts, even though I was never formally a teacher. But, I mean, I was teaching Sunday school at the church. I'm always talking to somebody about something, always trying to share something. I love persuading people to win, you know, and so in that sense. So, I mean, I remember a couple around the corner that was at our church, and they found out that, you know, we had gone through all this stuff, and they're like, okay, how did y'all get through it? Because we're about to kill each other too. We're going to get a divorce if we don't do something, and we're so scared we can't see. So they came over at the house and sat at the kitchen table, and you know, we got out a yellow pad, and I helped them do a budget. And it turns out, being in the real estate business, I knew their landlord, and they were 3 months behind on their rent. I called him from sitting at my kitchen table and worked out a deal for them to work out their back rent with them, and we got them in balance, gave them a plan, and that was the first counseling session I ever did, and I didn't have any idea what it was going to turn into, and I ended up doing it over the church after that. The pastor called and said, hey, I don't know anything about foreclosures, but I know you used to buy them and then you were one, so can you help these people? And so I went and sat down with some people and helped them stop their foreclosure at the church, and all of a sudden a ministry was born. And so it started just as a volunteer thing, and it very organically grew. But the thing that we started realizing very quickly was that we weren't the only one that was stupid. It's like everybody is when it comes to money. It's like everybody's stupid, and if you think you're not, you're really stupid, because everybody has messed up with money.
I've never heard that neighbor story, and I'm picturing the legal pad in your kitchen on the table. Do you recall how you felt after you said goodnight to them and you walked them through that? You actually got on the phone with their landlord and came up with a plan. Do you remember what that felt like? Was that a spark moment that you can recall?
No, it was just like, you know, I can do sixth grade math with a yellow pad. They were so in the fog they couldn't add.
Yeah.
And Sharon's trying to relate to the lady and give her some encouragement not to kill her husband, and, you know, and so you were just being friends.
Right.
So it wasn't like there was some kind of epiphany. It was just, you know, when your friend comes over for coffee and they're in a mess, you sit down, you help your friend. That's all we did. Yeah. It really wasn't anything any more formal or spiritual awakening than that. But when I look back on it, that was the first time we ever sat down and did that.
Wow. So now you're helping out a church where you just left us on that last answer. You're helping more people. You're beginning to sense some momentum that what you're sharing is helping people. Bridge the gap from that season of your life to going, maybe we do a radio show. What was that?
Well, I went on a radio station that was broke. They were in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The irony of ironies, the Dave Ramsey Show. Dave Ramsey Show starts on a bankrupt radio station. True story. WTN radio at that time was in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And a guy was running, you know, they couldn't pay their bills, obviously. And so I went down and I was on this local talk show. It was kind of a financial talk show. It's like a bad Saturday Night Live skit. You know, Bad Financial Hour, that was the name of the skit, you know. And so we went on there, and this cast of characters on this thing, on this radio station was like WKRP. I mean, it was characters. And so, anyway, I went on as a guest on his show to talk about a real estate thing. I was in this real estate club, and we started talking about helping people with money, and he had gone broke one time, and I went broke one time, so we started talking about that, and the phone started ringing, and we started helping people, and he goes, hey, come back down and do that again, and so I did, and then he quit because they didn't pay him his $35 or whatever, and I called the guy running it and talked him into letting me and another guy work for free, and we said, if we're really bad, you can cut our pay in half, and you know, we were really bad. It was country fried radio. It was Daryl and his other brother Daryl doing talk radio. And WWTN, we're talking Nashville. You know, I had to move up a floor and do that on the country station. But I mean, that's how it started. But we knew the answers to the questions, and people had questions. So they didn't care how fried we were, whether we sounded like we were in a trailer park or not. They didn't care. All they cared was there was a guy that cared. He'd been there, done that, and he cared, and he could help them. And that's all they cared about. And from day one, that's all it's ever really been.
Yeah. How much did you study some of the, because these intricate questions we hear on today's show, you have an answer for these things. It doesn't seem like you're ever that stumped. How much preparation did you do in those early days, or did that develop as the show grew?
Well, we had to develop a whole show because we didn't always have callers. So we had to have something to talk about. So we would do like a live event kind of a preparation, like we were giving a speech or something. And so we'd pull some of the curriculum out of Financial Peace University or something else and have it sitting there. And what ended up happening was two things. One was the other guy that was on with me was an investment guy. And so I learned for investment stuff from him. He learned some of the other stuff from me. And then we would get stumped on a question, or we'd answer it wrong and catch all kinds of hell. People would just send you hate mail for days, because you answered that wrong. And tax stuff in particular, I would always mess up tax stuff. So I started learning off of my mistakes. And every time I'd screw something up, I would study it and read it and learn that piece of the financial world, whether a little bit of estate planning or a little bit of tax or a little bit of investment stuff or a little bit of this or that. And then, of course, as we got more and more popular, we were challenged on some of these ideas. And the more you're challenged, the more you have to be able to build a defense. You be able to defend your idea, or it's a bad idea. And so we'd study and learn and adjust and polish and study and learn and adjust and polish. And that led us to be able to create the content. But to this day, one of the things we said from day one, and I still do it, it still aggravates people on radio, is if I don't know the answer to the question is I don't know. I had one of those on the air today in front of 13 million people, and the answer was, I don't know. You have to, I can tell you who to call, but I don't know. Yeah. I didn't know the answer. It was a technical rollover question with a 457, some little nuanced stuff that I probably really shouldn't have even been talking about, but I didn't know. So I just had to say, you're going to have to get some better advice because I'm not the answer. I always do that on tax stuff because my income tax stuff, I screw it up all the time.
I think just a minute ago you really mentioned why the show has worked, that there was a guy who cared and you gave him some practical answers. As the show began to gather momentum, what do you think the changes that were made as the show began to evolve, when did it hit a moment where you knew, wow, we're really touching a big nerve. This isn't just local radio anymore?
Well, we knew that we had back-to-back calls and that we were getting 1,000 people in an event, but we had no ratings on the radio station, 0 ratings, like we had no listeners at all. But nobody ever told us to say the call letters. So we were actually illegal because you're supposed to, by law, say the call letters once an hour and do station ID. And the thing was being run like a barnyard. I mean, we really didn't have any. We never said WTN. We never said 99.7. So Gaylord buys it out of bankruptcy, and they did research, and they found that, they said, do you listen to WTN? No. Do you listen to 99.7? No. Do you ever listen to Dave Ramsey on the radio? I never miss a show. Well, that's where I was on the air. So it was like this what they figured out was there were a whole bunch of listeners that didn't know what they were listening to in terms of the station, so it wasn't showing up in the ratings. So they taught us stationality, they call it in radio. So every time we took a call, it was WTN. Welcome to WTN. 737-9986 was the, or 737-997. So we had the call letters in the phone number. We had everything was call letters, name, call letters, name, to where it just make you throw up. It was so much of it. But we went to a 7 in one book from 0, which is unheard of in radio. And by the time it peaked out, just about 18, 24 months later, it was at a 14. We were the #1 radio show in the entire city of Nashville of any kind, music or anything, and we're in country musicville, So, but they were there. We just weren't getting credit in the ratings because we didn't know what we were doing. We were too stupid to do radio correctly.
Too stupid to do it, but you were doing it right for the listeners, and that's all that mattered. That's right.
We weren't really there for anything else. We were there for that.
So then you decide we need to take this thing bigger. And you decide to hire a guy who's sitting here in the audience on the front row tonight, Blake Thompson. I think this is such a great story because, again, you were just filling the need. We've got a need. Let's take this thing bigger. What did that look like in your mind's eye when it came to let's expand this?
Well, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew you could get like satellite time and you could put your signal on the satellite and people could take the signal off the satellite and other radio stations could carry the show. And it was called syndication. And other people were starting to do it a little bit in those days. Rush was 3 years ahead of us or 4 years ahead of us. Hannity was behind us. He came along later and eclipsed us. Dr. Laura was starting to get hot in those days. And so there's some shows starting to pop up, but mainly talk radio was local only in those days. There was a few people, Bruce Williams had a show out, and a few things like that. So we had to learn technically how to deliver the signal, which I didn't know anything about that, but I knew I had to buy satellite time, and I knew we needed somebody other than the local radio station people to help me learn all this stuff and do it. So I needed I don't know what you called him, a producer. So I need to produce something, so get something done. So we hired a guy from a local college. He had a job at working in a copy shop. He was making copies, not coffee. He wasn't a barista. And so, and hated his job. And so he was glad to get to do something else. He had no idea either what he was doing, but we were going to figure it out. And, we just busted in there and made every mistake in the world, but we figured it out. How to plug something in, how to unplug something, and how to get some engineer off his butt to get it working, and to get the signal up in the air, and then to talk some radio station into taking the signal down and putting it on. And we were such a legend by then in the Tennessee and in the Southeast because of these ratings. We were beating Rush. Nobody was beating Rush. We were beating Rush head to head. We were destroying Hannity head to head in Nashville. Now, Rush and Hannity have beat the crap out of me for years everywhere else. So shut up, Sean. But they're friends, both of them. They're good guys. But I mean, it was a story to tell for a little guy. It was a David and Goliath story, and we told that story a lot. That we're winning. So it was easy to pick up Southeastern stations, but we still had that twang. And so, Boston's laughing at us, like, you've got to be kidding. And, that kind of stuff. So, California's like, yeah, right. But I mean, the Southeast, the Texans, the Alabama people, they're my people, and so hillbillies are everywhere. So it was great. And it took off from that base, that Southeastern connectivity, that redneck connectivity made it work.
We're here obviously celebrating 25 years of the show, but you're so unique in that the show has given birth to a thriving organization that is now 600 plus team members. I mean, we hire so many people, I can't even keep up. And I want to go back to this moment. You're beginning to get momentum throughout the Southeast. You're beating big dogs. Give us a snapshot. Where are you at on Financial Peace, the book? Are you doing live events still at this moment? Because you're really branching out at this point, correct?
Well, when Blake started, there was probably, 8 of us or something like that. Blake was probably 8th or 9th person hired. And so we had a guy working on books, and we had a guy working on live events, and a guy working on Financial Peace University, a gal working on something else, And so, there was a couple of assistants helping us do stuff. But we're basically running around the office with our tail on fire. When you're running a small business like that, you're the CEO, you're the chief everything officer. And so I got to be able to lift boxes, put them on the truck. I got to be able to set up screens for the live events, and I did. You do everything. You do whatever it takes. And some of those hours were horrendous in those days. It was, 7 a.m. to midnight in a lot of days, because we're doing Financial Peace at night, teaching the class, and we're doing the show for 3 hours in the afternoon, trying to run the business during the day. Financial Peace, the book, took off simultaneously. Ended up being a publisher is attracted about that time, and so we went from self-published 150,000 copies to Viking Penguin came in, and I said, you guys don't have enough money to buy this book, and it turns out they did. So we were able to work out a deal. Go figure. And that was our first real published book that hit the New York Times that year. And so that's like 6 years into the radio show before that ever happened.
Wow. How would you define your role? You mentioned earlier that you see yourself as a teacher. You really are a great teacher. Is that how you view yourself to this day on the show for 3 hours? What do you think your primary role, or maybe some other roles as well, that you fill over the airwaves?
I am that. And to me, a teacher is someone who can sell you an idea. So I'm a salesman. I can make you believe that if you will do this, you will win. And here's the proof, and here's the process, and here's the logic. And when you do that, it's called hope. And Napoleon said great leaders are brokers of hope. And so hope has become the product for our whole company, whether it's a book, an event, a class, a radio show, a connectivity with an ELP or whatever. The product is hope. And so we're always trying to use that to connect and give someone hope. You give them hope with a spiritual connectivity. You give them hope with an emotional connectivity. You give them hope with a story. You give them hope with facts that says you're there and you're okay. And so it's something as simple as a guy called yesterday, and he was making $120,000 a year, and he got fired that morning. And, it's easy for me to say, how long did you make that? I made $120,000 for 5 years. I said, okay, here's the deal. You've made over 6 figures. There's a very high statistical likelihood, if you believe that you're going to be okay, that there's a gravitational pull that's always going to pull you over 6 figures, because you have ridden that bike. You know what it feels like to ride that bike. If you made 60 and you'd never made over 100, it's harder because you've never done it. They always say make the second millions easier. It is, just because you know what you can be done. You know, I've done it once, I can do it. And so, you know, it's the same thing. I can do it. Once I've done it, I can do it. So all I was doing to him was, he's in the middle of his emotional funk because he got fired. And yet I can speak life onto him and go, okay, here's the right things that you did. Here's the good things you got. Here's your talents. Here's where you screwed up. You should have been fired. When he told us why, you were on the air with me.
That's right.
And here's why you should have got fired. A young guy. But I said, you know, but you've got the ability, dude. And all I did is speak life onto him and go, because that's what people did to me when I was down. I had people kick me when I was down, but most people give you a hand up. Most people say, you know, you're really not as ugly as your life looks right now. You really don't suck as bad as everything looks. You're going to be better. And when you tell people that and you give them a reason to believe it that's logical, you're a purveyor of hope.
I want you to talk about your different personas that you have on the air, because sometimes you just get after somebody, but you're always caring, but you'll just tell them exactly how it is. And then I've heard you dial it back and just be compassionate when a single mom is on the line and has faced a tragedy in her life, lost her husband and her partner. When you began to kind of figure out, I'm this way with this call, I'm this way with this call, were you comfortable being tough when you had to be tough? Was that natural for you, or did you develop that over time?
I'm probably a lot tougher and blunter now than when I started. I was a lot softer, sugar sweet, like sweet tea, soft. But I started figuring out, too, that, you know, and even running our organization over the years, one of the things we say around our place when we're dealing with each other is to be unclear is to be unkind. So when you've got a team member that's misbehaving and you don't tell them, then you just continually get more frustrated. That's not fair to them. You've been unkind to them. You thought you were being nice, like Southern passive-aggressive nice, but you really weren't because you didn't tell them what they were doing. And so I'm not helping someone when that kid minimized the reason he got fired on that call. I can't let that lay, because if I do, it's not good for him. I never jump on somebody and thump them for the entertainment value. I say never, almost never, because the only time I do it is when somebody calls mad at me and they want to disagree with me. Now, I'll chew them up like a meat grinder just because it's great radio, you know. But my pulse rate doesn't change. I just eat them alive. It's fun. But that doesn't happen once in a blue moon these days, because nobody calls to disagree because I'm right. But most of the time when it's the different people like that, if I'm being 99.99% of the time, if I'm being tough with somebody, it's for them. It's not for the listener. It's not for the entertainment value. It's for them. Even when I hang up on somebody, like the fourth time I tell you to do something and you argue with me, I'm moving on. You called me up to get me to endorse your stupidity. You didn't call me up for advice. And I'm moving on to somebody else. And so it's like, I can't help you. You're on hold. And we put you on hold, and that means you just got hung up on. You just don't know it yet. But I'm not going to argue you into winning. I'm going to show you what winning looks like. And if you're broken and hurting, I'm going to meet you there in a very soft, tender way, because that's how people met me when I was broken and hurting. Other times when I was bowed up and I was acting like a victim and somebody else's fault, a friend of mine would say, thump, and go, you know, you're not going to get better as long as you think it's somebody else's fault, because this is your fault. And that's the best stuff that ever happened to me in my life. And so I want to be that loving uncle or dad that somebody never had or whatever in there. And, you know, it upsets some of my Christian friends because they think you're supposed to be sugar sweet all the time. And to be unclear is to be unkind. I'm not an enabler.
One of the things that impresses me so much about you is that over this period, you have been the day-to-day CEO of an organization that has continued to grow, and you're on the air for 3 hours. And I know, because I'm on your team, I get to see you do meetings from the moment you step in to the moment you walk into the studio, and then many times in meetings after 3 hours. Just curious, when you walk in on any given day, I know the phone lines are just ready to go. People are lined up because they need help. What do you mentally do, or how do you mentally prepare to go from that CEO leadership role to that friend, that teacher on the air?
Well, after doing it for a few years, you get into a rhythm but I used to have a thing a Hebrew word on my screen. We used to have screens up in front of us, computer screens. They're now down in the desk because it's all cool. But it was the word shama, which means the real answer behind the answer. And so, and I wrote below that, get behind the question. Because a lot of times the question they're asking is not what's really going on. Ooh. And so I'm always trying to get behind the question. What's behind the question? What's really going on? Because sometimes you dig and you pick a little bit, and then all of a sudden you got a marriage problem in there, but they're calling about something else. Or they really have a gambling issue, and they really are calling about something else. And so there's something else going on, so I'm digging in that. And, we've got a little group of people that just show up. It can be a big group if they wanted to be, but only about 5 people show up out of the 600, and we pray before we go on the air. God, take this 3 hours and use it. It's yours, and help me to be effective. Help me to feed your lambs, and help me not say something stupid that ruins everything. Because you can ruin an entire career in a minute and 16 seconds on the air. People have done it, and as it's a powerful thing, these microphones.
Well, I'm telling you, this is a powerful event because we've got real Dave Ramsey Show fans, listeners here in the theater, and we're going to take some of their questions. Leading us off is Jason. Jason, what is your question for Dave?
Hey, guys. My question is, what is the origin of the debt-free scream?
That's a great question.
I wish I had done that on purpose. It's so genius. I didn't do it on purpose. It was an accident. A lady called, and I don't know how many years ago. People ask me about this all the time, and it was somewhere 17 to 20 years ago, something like that. I have figured out that range. It's something like that. It wasn't in the first 5 years, but it was, and, we're teaching people how to get out of debt. We're saying sell everything and, be intense, take 6 jobs, beans and rice, rice and beans, don't go to a restaurant, don't go on vacation, dial it in, baby, bring it, game on. And this woman called from Grand Rapids. I do remember that. And from the moment I picked up the phone, she machine gunned me verbally. I couldn't say a word. She just, I did it, Dave, I did it, Dave. I took 3 jobs, Dave. I had a garage sale. I sold everything. A guy came to my house, Davey. I sold him the bushes out of the front of my house, Dave. I did it. I'm debt free. I'm debt free. I'm debt free. And she hung up. And it was so long ago, we didn't have email. We had fax machines in the studio. And you could fax in your questions. So the fax starts going off. And I'm reading them. This is the best call you've ever had, Dave. Do that again. And I went, I didn't do anything. I didn't even get to hang up the phone. I just picked it up, and it was gone, And we just kind of, Blake and I kind of laughed about it. And we didn't think anything about it. And about 2 weeks later, this old country guy calls up, and he's like, hey, Dave. Yeah, I want to do that. You want to do what? I want to scream. You want to scream what? I want to scream I'm debt-free, man, like that woman did. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, I've been working my butt off, man, like 16 jobs. I ain't seen my wife. And he goes off and tells the whole story. And I went, well, all right, I'm debt-free. And he hangs up. So, Blake and I looked at each other and we went, there is something magical about this. It's weird, but there is something. And so we talked about it if we get off the air. We used to do a debrief, Laura and Blake and I, every day when we come off the air, we go, okay, what went wrong, what went right, what can we do better, kind of do a CSI and autopsy on the show that day. And so we were talking about it, and we're going, well, maybe people want to celebrate, their victory. And so I went on the air and I said, if you, did all this stuff and, got out of debt and you want to scream your debt free, you can call in. And people started calling in. They started calling in. And then we were on Fox Business, and a guy came on the weekend to our office and mailed his final payment at our office mailbox. Took a picture, taking a picture, mailing his final payment from our office mailbox. And we used that debt-free scream on Fox Business. And I was asking him, I'm like, dude, where are you from? Indianapolis. And he drove to Nashville. I'm like, you drove to Nashville to mail your bills? That's just whacked. I wanted to be at your place. Your place is where it all happened. Your place is where I first heard I could do this and believed I could do it. Your place, man. And so it was like this traveling to Mecca thing. And so we're like, okay. And then a guy comes in. We have the bookstore across with a coffee shop, and lady comes in, and she wanted to use the bookstore phone and call and look at me through the glass. And so So she's stretching the phone over, and they kept doing that for a couple of years. They kept breaking the phones because they would pull them off and they'd drop and hit the floor, you know? And so we finally got smart and put in headsets, and I would say 80% of our debt-free screams now are in the lobby. People travel from all over the world. We've had them from Australia, we've had them from the UK, we've had them from Guam, travel to be in our offices to celebrate this milestone in their life that they finally became debt-free. It's so visceral, and it's the most watched thing we have on YouTube. There's something about people, real people telling real stories where they really got to win in an area of your pain that inspires you, it's the most popular, iconic thing I've ever seen in business or in speaking or in teaching, out of everything we've done. I mean, to the point, I'm walking through the airport the other day with a friend of mine, a guy yells, he's like, "Hey Dave, I'll see you in November." And Dave Ramsey. I said, "Yeah, hey." And he goes, "I'll see you in November." And my buddy's like, "Who is that?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, what is he coming to see you in November for?" And I said, "Well, that's the tribal speak. That's tribal language, dude. That means he's going to be debt-free in November, and he's coming to do his debt-free scream." He knew what he meant. I knew what he meant. My buddy's like, "What are they talking about?" But our tribe gets this stuff at a real deep level. And so we've started understanding story and the power of story a lot more with my friend Donald Miller and Seth Godin and a few others on tribes. And so we started to understand what happened there. But the initial parts of it were accidental. We were only smart enough to realize something was going on, so we didn't squash it. But we didn't invent it. We've tried to invent some other stuff that didn't work, but nothing has worked like that yet, ever.
Dave, I've heard you talk about that. It wasn't intentional, but you figured out that the audience is the hero in that moment. They are the ones who did all the work. You were the trusted guide. That really is what has made it so magical.
And I've told my friends in talk radio this all over America, the famous big ones and the little ones that are trying to get going, radio stations too. When you make yourself the hero in the story and you're on the air, you are not appealing at all. When you make yourself the guide for people's journey and they get to be the hero in their story, they're Rocky, you're just Mickey.
Yes.
They're Luke Skywalker, you are simply Yoda. Be Yoda. It's a lot more satisfying. You'll be a lot more successful because people don't want to hang out with other heroes. They want to be the hero in their life. They want to be the hero in their story. They want to get out of debt. They want to become wealthy. They want to be successful in their marriage with their kids. And you know, they don't want to hear all the time about how successful I am. They don't give a rip about that, except to the extent it means I can help them. And so keep your focus off of yourself. It's a weird type of humility, but it's an accurate measure of why people are really there. They're really not there because they think Dave Ramsey's all that. They're there because they want to be the hero in their story.
Jason, thanks for the question. Up next is Matthew here in the audience. Matthew, what's your question for Dave?
Yeah, Dave, my question is, at what point in the show's history did you start saying, "I'm better than I deserve," and what prompted that?
I heard someone say it. Like most of the things I say, I stole it. But I don't remember who it was. I can think back. Okay, so what year? You can help me with this, Mr. Politics.
Okay.
What year was Bill Clinton elected?
92.
92? Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yes,
then we started the show in 92. He was elected in November. We started in June. So I've probably been saying it for 25 years then. The only reason I remember that was after I had been saying it for about a year and a half, Clinton was in office, and he said it. And someone said, "Oh, you've been listening to Dave Ramsey." And he went, "Who's Dave Ramsey?" And so he had heard it somewhere too and used it. The reason I picked it up was, for me, it's a statement of grace. I am better than I deserve, but because of Jesus, I am better than I deserve. And I deserve hell, and I'm not going. And so it's a theological Christian statement for me. But it also has become kind of one of those tribal things. We've even extended it to where we said, okay, if somebody's parking your car or somebody's delivering a pizza and you ask them how they're doing, they say better than I deserve, you have to give them an extra tip because that's code for I'm working this extra job to get out of debt. And your job is on the other end of that's to help them. You got to get up their tip. And so servers everywhere, even that don't listen to me, have learned to say better than I deserve.
That's pretty smart. I like that. Thank you for the call, Matthew. I want to ask you this. I don't know if you can possibly do this, but I'm going to try to get you to give us a specific story. If you think back on all of the calls, there have been some amazingly emotional calls, real life happening right there on the telephone with you, some tragic stuff. Is there a most emotional call for you, meaning you really had to fight through it to get through it because it really tugged at your heart?
You probably remember the first ones, even though they might not be the most, if that makes any sense. I am more apt to cry on the air than I am to completely lose control laughing. I laugh a lot, but I've lost control completely twice laughing, and we had to go to a commercial break 2 times in 25 years. Like 13-year-old girl at the lunch table, giggle, laughing. I can't get it back, okay? But I've lost control crying a lot more than that when someone calls in, and you just get caught up in their story. There's 2 that come to mind that I just couldn't breathe. There were old calls there a long time ago, but one was when we first invaded Afghanistan. One of our big stations is in San Antonio, Texas, and a huge Army presence there, obviously, a huge base there. And a lady calls me on Monday, and her husband was in Special Forces and Army, had been killed in Afghanistan on Sunday. And they came by and saw her Monday morning, and an hour later, she's on the phone with me on national radio going, tell me the story. And I just was like, I'm talking to this widow. She's got 2 little babies. I can't even think. And the good news is that, you know, one of the things that's happened to us is we've been able to build this huge network of coaches that we have trained in financial stuff, financial coaches, a network of investment advisors, our ELPs and our SmartVestor pros, and a network of churches. 40,000 churches have now taught Financial Peace University. Now, the military, when they lose one of their own, they come around the spouses beautifully. They do a great job. But she called me in the middle of the initial throes of her grief, and the responsibility of that was breathtaking. And so I spent a little time with her. I said, listen, just don't make any big decisions. That's what we always tell folks when they lose a loved one. Don't make any big decisions. Don't make any big decisions. And then I was able to plug her in. Laura picked up after that. Laura was on the phones in those days. And plug her into, they had the chap on sea. The military's wonderful. And, but we were able to plug her in. Local church got around her, a coach. They've got life insurance money coming out their ears at this point, so you're going to have some investment people. And you just get a group of people around her and let her move slow and have wisdom. In the multitude of counsel, there's safety. So we were able to surround her and give her this hug more than just a 2-minute radio answer to something like that. And the other one was a guy in Atlanta called me, and he was so calm, I didn't get it at first. But the story basically was he had just left the oncologist, and the oncologist had told him he had 2 months to live. He had cancer. It was all over him. It had metastasized. And he was on his way home to tell his wife. And he calls me. I'm like, well, how do I get in this lineup? And you find out you're dying. I'm the first guy you call? And all it was he wanted to walk through very sanely, very calmly, logically, his estate plan and make sure, okay, I want to make sure I got everything in place because that's going to help me emotionally grieve this and walk through this with her knowing that she's cared for. And so we walked through just a checklist and said, okay, where are you spiritually? Do you know the Lord? Where are you with your will? Where are you with your life insurance? And I just started walking through the checklist of a thing. And he had pulled over the side of the road. He was on a cell phone. And I said, man, can we just pray for you? And he kind of started breaking up then at the end of the call. And he said, yeah, I got to go home now. I got to talk to her. And I'm just like, we got to go to a break. I can't breathe. You know, my throat is just completely tight. And I look up and Laura and Blake are both crying. You know, it's just like, y'all are no help. And so, but, these people, there's this medium of talk radio is so intimate. And there's something a little bit anonymous about it because you're not on camera. Mm-hmm. And so that gives people permission to go places sometimes they wouldn't go, even with one of their best friends or even with their priest or their pastor. And because they got that little bit of an anonymous thing and they can tell me stuff that really they shouldn't tell me And they sure shouldn't tell me in front of 14 million people, but they do. It's amazing.
But I'm listening to that, and I also think that has a lot to do with trust. He trusted you enough. He had listened to you enough that in this moment of despair, he trusts you enough to call you and ask you. How serious do you take that trust?
Oh, it scares me to death. It's a tremendous responsibility. It means that if I mess up in my personal life and it's on the front page of the newspaper, I've violated that. And it's not like a celebrity, so I have a responsibility to my fans. It's not one of those things like a sports guy or something like that. This is like I lose my ability to help them if I break that trust, if I violate it. And so I'm pretty like pharisaical, fanatical about trust stuff, about who I'm around, where I'm around, and people and that kind of stuff, and people with cameras and stuff, and the type of picture they want to take with me and what situation and how that's going to be perceived somewhere. I'm just whacked about it because I can't violate that. I cannot lose that.
All right, next in our audience with a question is Mark. Mark, what's your question for Dave?
What was the funniest story and or weirdest call you have received over your 25 years in the air?
How do you choose that?
That's a long list of those, man. Oh, man. Oh. One of them that we caught, I can remember three that I can use. I think I can tell them without causing a problem. One of them was this guy calls me up that was just dumber than a rock. And he has this idea he's going to put a payphone in his house. And his family is going to put the money in the payphone, and he's going to take the money out of the payphone, and so he's going to have a free phone. And I was like, dude, who gave them the money to put in the phone? I did. And when you take the money out of the phone, who's got the money? I do. I said, do you not know you're a dog chasing its tail? You don't have a free phone because with a payphone you have to pay for the line anyway, and you're just a dog chasing its tail. And if you don't pay for the line, there's going to be an air gap. You're not going to have a service. So, and I just started laughing. I was just like, this is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. And I'm actually answering the question, so I'm as dumb as he is. And I started laughing so hard, they had to go to break early because I couldn't. It was one of the times I completely lost it on the air. But other funny ones, a guy called me up right after Janet Jackson's Super Bowl thing. We didn't run a delay before that, but they fined CBS $500,000 for that wardrobe malfunction thing. So. And they started really leaning in on what could be said on the air, and they came by and kind of warned us, and we thought a $500,000 fine because somebody drops an F-bomb. We don't have a delay. We're out of business, and so we put a delay in. We put a 10-second delay in, which almost all shows were already running, but we didn't get calls that were weird. I mean, man, the next week after I put that the next week, this guy calls up and goes, "Hey, Dave, my wife says she won't have sex with me if I don't make at least $650 a month. What do you think about that?" And I said, well, I think I'd get to work.
Maybe the best advice you've ever given.
He starts cussing and yelling and screaming, "You no good blankety blank 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 do blank blank blank. You're just like her." And what he... I'm like, well, no, not exactly like her, but I wasn't making any offers. But, oh, my gosh. But 10 seconds is an eternity. You can say a whole lot of stuff that disappears. So I kind of let him talk for a minute and laughed at him and said, dude, none of your stuff's making the air, and really get a job, and I'm just hung up on him, and we dumped it. It never made the air, but we laughed for days about that. And we used to do a stupid tax hour was the other one. People would call in and say stupid stuff they had done to lose money. And some of them are just bizarre, but this guy calls up and he goes, yeah, so I put my wife's breast implants on a credit card. And then I catch her in bed with my boss. So I drug him out in the front yard and beat the crap out of him. And I got fired. I got arrested. I got a divorce. I still had to pay the credit card bill. And I never touched them things.
Wow.
Yeah, we had to go to break on that one. It's like a country song right there,
It
man.
really was. You should write that right now. Get some of your friends to put a
Quick,
tune to
get
that.
John Rich in here. Let's pick it out.
That's a hit. All right, we're going to go next to Andrew in the audience. Andrew, what is your question for Dave?
Yeah, if you could go back and do it all again, is there anything you would do differently?
Oh, yeah. Always. There's always something you do differently. Yeah, I am a hillbilly for sure. And if y'all don't know about hillbillies, hillbillies don't do drive-by shootings. If you offend them, they buy the house next door and lay siege. So it's a different mentality. And so when we would lose a radio station and someone would violate a contract, and the radio business is pretty filthy business as far as people don't know what contracts mean. Until you get big enough, you can sue their pants off. And so we would just get hammered by these companies, and they would just straight up lie to us. And I would get so angry. Because when I lose a station in Las Vegas, that was the first time I remember doing this, that means all those people don't get helped. That single mom, all those people I'm talking to. And so we're like up in Vegas, we had a 2,000 person event. We come home, radio station people are all like, that's the best event ever. And the next week they cancel the show against in violation of the contract. And so I basically went on the air. They gave like a 2-week notice or something. I'm like, you can't give a 2-week notice. You have a 6-month contract. I'm going to, And so I went on the air, which I really should not have done. It was low class. And basically told all the fans to go over there with pitchforks and torches to the radio station. And to call, so many people called that they couldn't get business done. They shut their phones down for like a week. And people were protesting out front. And so later on, I tried to get a radio station in another city, and they had heard about that. And probably not the best plan. At the time, it felt like the correct thing to do. We had been messed over, and I felt like they needed their face punched in, and I was in the process of doing it. And I've done stuff like that more times than I wished I had, and more times than my team wished I had. But there's you have to fight to win, too. If you're just a wuss, you don't win. And so you got to fight and scratch and claw. And I probably just should have had a lot more class about my fighting, scratching, and clawing. And if I was to do some of that over, I'm a little more polished today. I still get with stuff if it needs to be, if we need to get with them, I can still do that if I need to. But I handle it in a little different way, and don't create such a spectacle of myself in the process. And my wife is going, yes, you should not do that. So
That was such a great question. I want to do a couple follow-ups on that. You kind of shared some things you would do differently because you didn't do them the right way, but things that you did in the early days, the hustle factor, that anybody listening in here tonight, they're on that journey. They're in those humble beginnings, things that you're glad you did it that way, and you do it again because it made you and this show and the organization who and what they are today.
yeah, if you're out there growing something, the Bible says don't despise small beginnings. This started on a card table in my living room, and sitting there with that couple that night with that yellow pad, and then it started on a broke radio station. And the things we did right were we were smart enough to not be under the illusion someone was going to do it well for us, meaning we didn't sell the show to somebody. And so a lot of the shows were growing up, and they were being sold for $50 million or $40 million or $78 million, or these are numbers that really happened all around me in the first 10 years of the show. Once we got to about 100, 150 stations, we were making some pretty serious advertising revenues, so we were very attractive to these publicly traded companies who were scarfing up all these shows and owned them. And we're the only nationally syndicated radio show in America in the top 20 shows that is not corporate owned. We're certainly the only one in the top 4 or 5 that's not corporate owned. And it's not no slam on my friends that work for corporate. That's fine. That they just are an employee of that company and they do great. They make a lot of money. That's fine. But we would have lost control of the ability to do the mission that we have had we done that. And so that's something we did right. We didn't sell. I remember sitting with one of these radio consultants, which in the radio business there's about 3 people that are real consultants, and the rest of them, consultant just means unemployed. Wish I was on the air. And so they're just twerps. And so I'm sitting with this guy at one of these radio conventions, and he's all arrogant and kicked back, and he goes, "So, Ramsey, what is your end game?" I went, "End game?" He goes, "Well, when are you going to sell? What's your end game? Aren't you building this to sell? Are you going to take it public? What are you doing? What's your end game?" Dude, you just don't even understand us. I can't even answer that intelligently inside of an hour. Our end game is helping people, and we're going to use the show to do that, and we have to make money to stay on the air to hire all the people that cause us to do that, and so the money is a fuel that causes us to be able to help people. That's our end game. Well, that's kind of corny. And I went, "See, I told you. You wouldn't understand." But, you know, corporate America doesn't help you with quarterly stock price, you know. So I don't, you know, we just do what we do with excellence, and we do it so well and have gotten so big they can't ignore us. And, you know, we're the 800-pound gorilla now in the space. And so, but what we did right was we wouldn't have survived. We would have been put on the shelf with somebody else and not gotten the attention that we wanted. And so every time somebody didn't take good care of us, it gave us that much more energy to continue to fight, scratch, claw, and stay independent.
Your show is about real people, their lives, and their money. And we've heard tonight it's very personal because of that focus. Over 25 years, as you look back, what have you learned about people?
Anyone can win. Anyone can win. A lot of people don't think they can, but that doesn't mean they can't. They may not know how to. They may not know the tactical steps. They may not have the whatever. But I don't care if you're Southern or Northern, liberal or Democrat, liberal Democrat or conservative Republican. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I don't care if you're Hispanic, African American, white, whatever, purple. I don't care if you got green hair, if you look like you fell into a tackle box. I don't care. It doesn't matter. You can win. You can win. You've got to be willing to ask yourself the question, what has to be true that's not true today about me and my life for me to be able to take that next step up? And anybody can win. Now, some people got a lot more obstacles than others. I mean, I meet people with incredible disabilities that have overcome them, and they're more successful than supposed whole-bodied, whole-minded people, you know, because they had a tremendous desire, an engine inside that believed they could win, and they've done amazing things, and we've interviewed some of them on the air over the years. You look back and go, but the problem is people the very person who's got it all, you got everything you need except belief. You just don't think you can. And so our job is to make you believe. And when we can make you believe, when that light bulb comes on over the top of your head, like one of those cartoons, that's when the people at Ramsey Solutions and the Dave Ramsey Show have had a good day.
Why do you keep coming back to the mic every day?
Oh, I love it. It's fun. I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, if I wasn't me, man, I'd want to be me. What are you talking about? I have a wonderful life. I mean, people actually care what I think, and I get to tell them what I think all day long. Oh, my gosh, who gets that, you know? Some people go a whole week and nobody asks them anything about what they think, you know?
That's true. That's really interesting.
It's
I like
pretty,
that.
it's pretty ridiculous.
All right, 2-part question. And I know you, I get the privilege to know you, and I know you don't like the word legacy, but here we sit, and the reality is if you quit tomorrow, you've left an incredible legacy. 100 years from now, 2-part question. How do you want the show to be remembered? And then, what do you want the lasting impact to be?
That's a deep question, Coleman.
Well, it's 25 years. I figure I had to give you something to think about.
Yeah, really. How do I want the show to be remembered? I want the show to be remembered as the show that started all of these other shows that we're now launching, including the King Coleman Show, the Rachel Cruz YouTube channel, the Chris Hogan podcast, and on and on and on and on, because that'll keep it going. And it was just the one that started it. And he really wasn't as good as those other guys, but he's just the one that started it. And that'd be a pretty good legacy right there, because I'm not really as good as all those others. They're really going to be better than me. They're way ahead of where I was at their point in their career. They are on a trajectory. You're on a trajectory with your stuff. It's just incredible. I'm so proud of our team and where it's going on that. So, yeah, I just want to be, that'd be a great legacy, be the one that started it. How do we want it to be remembered, or what we want to be the impact? Well, it's a pretty spiritual answer, but it is the truth, and I'm not going to tell you anything else. It sounds hyper spiritual, but I'm a Christian, and so if I can get somebody that doesn't know God to get to meet God, that doesn't know Jesus to get to meet Jesus, I've had a great day. And so if we leave a whole bunch of those behind, that'd be a whole lot better than just getting people out of debt. Getting them out of debt would be good, but if we can leave that behind, somebody that, they met somebody that wasn't weird religious, they were just somebody, just a regular person that just loved God, and God changed their life. And so God changed my life. He changed my life. And for me to get to talk about that and somebody get to meet God because I'm yakking about getting out of debt on the air, and then they go, I've never heard anybody talk like that. And they actually want to know something about it, and I get to talk to them about it directly or indirectly. That's about as good as a legacy as we could leave.
How does it make you feel when you get results from the team that say millions of people have gone through Financial Peace University, and you start to think about the millions upon millions of dollars that people have paid off in debt, literally changing, this is the phrase you use, their family tree. And you sit here tonight and we reflect on 25 years. What does that mean to you when you lay your head down on the pillow at night?
I didn't do it. I just showed them how to do it. They're the hero. They did it. They believed that they could win, and they took the steps to go win. And they probably got the snot beat out of them along the way. We all do. They're rocky on the ropes in the end, yelling, Adrian, but he won. He won every single time. He won. But almost all, whatever. But it's just whatever. Bad metaphor. But point being that I was just the guide. I was not the hero. And so the end of the story is not that the Dave Ramsey Show is the hero. We're just a really effective guide.
25 more?
Well, I've told Blake and my Ramsey kids, and you've been in some of these conversations, and Laura, that I'm going to stay on the air until I don't make sense, and y'all will have to tell me when that is.